test run last year, so it's not eligible for any of the awards this year. We'll have to go out and start over. Okay, try and be sort of quick about this. Sue and I did the Seattle course to give it a test run in late November, I guess, early January or December. And if I can bring up the Word document here. Okay, can everybody see the screen? No?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so the course we did,
The only thing that is a problem is that this is spotlighted.
minor technical difficulty.
Okay. If you're on Zoom, can you tell us if you can see this shared screen? Can you see the document of the sharing? Yep, okay.
Ah, good, okay.
Can the folks at home, someone say
So-
something so we can make sure we can hear you?
I've got something blocking it here.
Can you hear me?
Hold on, Joe. So for those of you in the room, there's input audio on the computer and through the microphone, so make sure that there's three.
It's this thing,
microphones.
how do I get rid of
You're
this?
Asking questions,
Oh, there you go.
you need to use a microphone so that the folks
Okay.
at home can hear us.
Let's see if I can. Oh, okay. We did the Seattle course. And that's the San Juan course. Let's get down. There we are. We sailed the course. We started at Point Jefferson, sailed to the University of Washington buoy, down to Meadow Point, and back up to Point Jefferson. And there were some interesting things about that. The buoy at Point Jefferson doesn't get put into place until sometime in late spring, probably. So at the moment, it's a virtual waypoint. It's still quite usable, but when you're starting, okay, stop share. And uh-oh, I'm in trouble here now. If we can find the sequence of pictures here.
Yeah, they should be in order.
Okay, here we go. I'm looking for. Okay, here's the first one. I hope you can see the virtual mark here. There's a 20-foot radius circle around that mark. And to have an official start, we have to be somewhere in that circle as we make our start. And here we are. This is how we recorded our time. We took a picture of our plotter. And it gives us our latitude and longitude over in this neighborhood, and it gives us our time down here. And then took another picture, and you can see our track goes through that circle. And as we get around the course and back to the finish, once again, there's the circle. And when you're trying to hit a 40-foot diameter circle that's not obvious, there's no mark or anything like that, it gets to be pretty interesting. So when you're doing this, if the mark is not there, or if you're doing the Port Townsend course, you'll need to enter the latitude and longitude on your plotter and then put a 20-foot radius circle around that, so that if you're using it as a start, you can hit the target. If you're just using it as a mark, you don't have to be within 20 feet. All you have to do is go around it. So it shouldn't be a problem, except if you're starting at Point Jefferson, and I don't think many people will. Should be okay. And let's see, where did we get? Go to the next one. You can see our track goes through the circle. And there should be one more. There's our finish time and our finish location. And this one shows our route. If you follow the the red line, we started going this way and had to tack up to get around the buoy off of Richmond Beach. And then we were trying to stay out of the current as we headed south to Meadow Point, and then had a fairly straightforward leg back to Jefferson Point. I'm going to go back up here for a minute. Well, let's go to this one. That's showing a speed through the speed over ground of 3.2 knots, a speed through the water of 5. It's giving me a true wind speed of 6.5. That's not too bad, but if we go up here to this one, you can see at the start, there was, well, it's 11.5 knots of wind. Right off of Jefferson Point, there's a big wind hole. So it's pretty tricky trying to get an angle that will take you over that 20-foot circle or 20-foot radius for the mark. So we zigzagged quite a bit trying to get lined up carefully to do that. Anyway, that's a test run. We submitted this information to Paul English, and hopefully next month he'll be here to give you a brief presentation on how to submit your information and document your time and course to him. And then you'll be eligible for potentially an award at the end of the year. Okay, that's what I've got. Any questions on that?
Yes,
If you're gonna ask a question, use the
Oh.
microphone.
just one question. What's the time to beat now?
Oh, I didn't, it's 2 hours and something like that. I don't have that information with me, but I did get a corrected time for it. And since it doesn't really count, we'll probably just have Paul put that on the website as a test run. But right now, there are no records. The first person who goes out and does one of these courses will set the record.
No, I think that is the record, Joe.
Okay, anyone else?
I think that is the record. I think you
Okay,
just set
Vince,
the
you're on.
record.
So, I'd like to introduce Nigel Barron of CSR. Nigel, come on up. We asked Nigel to come and speak about sail design and sail manufacture based on his. My mic's not on?
No, it is. You just kind of gotta hold it. Don't talk to the side, talk to the top of it.
Got it. As you can tell, we're still working out our AV stuff, but Nigel has a lot of experience at the very high end with sail design and working with loft. And so welcome, and I think we want this to be a real conversational thing, so please jump in and ask questions as we go. Nigel, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so thank you, everyone. When Vince asked me to do this, the first thing I asked him was, you can't really find anybody else. And he assured me he'd already asked all of them. So here we are. Just briefly, it's kind of funny for me to be talking about sails because I don't think I've actually purchased my own sail since 2000, somewhere in there. But since then, just with the current boat, our Reichel Pew 55 that I run, we've probably purchased 30 sails over the last 5 years. So I've got a fair bit of experience in sort of the buying of sails. That boat, when we first brought it out here, was North Sails. It's currently Doyle. So I've got a little bit of experience on that side of things, and I'll kind of going to go through that. So I've kind of broke this into 2 pieces. And again, like Vince said, I'd love for this just to be a conversational thing. I've broken it into sort of 2 pieces. First, sort of talking about some of the modern sail technology and the sails that are available, and sort of what I learned throughout this, because I needed to do a bit of research just as a refresher, is I have never come across a more powerful marketing machine than sailmakers. Everybody calls everything a different name, even though it is the same thing. So I assure you, it's hard to go wrong. But if you were to look at the websites and the marketing, you would not believe that. So sort of talking about the branding, the sales, the technology, and then the second part of that, which to me is the most important piece, is the boat and setting up the boat and getting the right sails for your boat. And I think that is really more important at this level than the sails and the brand that you purchase, whether you want the blue logo, the red and blue, the yellow and black. Ultimately, that is not what is going to win you a race, particularly in Puget Sound. What's going to win you a race is going to be crew work, boat prep, going the right way. You know, there's a lot of other things other than sails. Now, there is definitely differences in sales. There is differences. There's new evolving technology. And in fact, the deltas between sort of North and the other brands are narrowing at the moment. But ultimately, I've kind of decided to break it into two parts because the more that I have spent sailing at sort of a Grand Prix level, it has become evident that the crew work and the boat prep is the biggest determinant in the results. And, you know, I can tell you the amount of work that we put into getting our boat dialed in we did back-to-back Hawaii races. And so, you know, we did a Transpac, broke a bunch of stuff, came back, rebuilt the boat, went out and did a Pac Cup, finished second to Roy to Disney's Pyewacket. And, you know, it was a completely different boat. And that's sort of at the level that we're at, you know, sort of the adage is, if you're not breaking it, it's overbuilt. And if it's overbuilt, it's heavy. So you have an expectation that some things are going to break. It's just whether they're the things that you have to have in order to cross the finish line. You know, it's like Dave Ullman said, right? You can't, in order to be first to finish, first you have to finish. So, you know, that's sort of the two things. So I'm sure a lot of you know, everybody's got different brands. We've got, you know, North has got their 3DI that started off originally as 3DL. Now it is 3DI. To be clear, the 3D is in the name 3DI is literally the making of it. It goes onto a 3D mold. And that is the unique piece of what North has. The 3D is that it is not a two-dimensional sail. So it's not pieces that are glued together on a floor. It is a 3D mold that is unique to each sail that they make. But as we'll get into, you have Doyle's got Stratus, UK's got X-Drive. There's a Fusion from Quantum, Quantum IQ, Ullman Fiber Path. What else did I get in here? And then within that, there's other, you know, the one thing that North has proprietary cloths. Doyle has Stratus, but at the end of the day, there's Contender, Dimension Polyant, Challenger that are making sailcloths that other lofts are using, right? There's a million lofts, but we probably can only name like 5 brands because we forget about the, you know, Raleigh Taskers or that guy at the boat show that's always selling like Catalina 22 sails, right? I mean, you know, there's a bunch of different sail lofts, but they're all, for the most part, buying their cloth from the same sort of 4 manufacturers. And that sort of plays into this whole narrowing of the technological band between North that was very far ahead of everybody else. And now everybody else sort of catching up as the, you know, the technology's evolved and become more available to the other sail makers. So we've always joked, yeah.
So North has the 3DI.
Oh,
And the other sail makers. North has the 3DI, and the other sail makers don't have that technology. Is the 3DI that big an advantage? And I gather you're not using it?
we're not anymore. No, we were using 3DI, and then we've swapped to Doyle, and I'll get to that in terms of how you select your loft. The 3D is the fact that they make it on a mold. That is unique to North. Nobody else makes them on a 3D mold like that. The key piece in the North technology is, what do they call it here? The sorry, I have to read it. I should have made this bigger. It's the spread film technology, right? So that's the key. That was the original piece of North's technology, was the idea that, you know, you are actually taking single filaments and you're coating them in a heat set, and then you're laying those out. That was what was 3DI at the time. You know, 3DL was basically that, but with Mylar, and then they eliminated the Mylar. So what we'll talk about is there are other companies that are making that type of sailcloth now, And so the unique piece of North is really the 3D aspect of it being made on a mold. The actual cloth itself, that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, is the actual cloth itself, that technology has narrowed the delta between the other brands. So yeah, 3DI is, again, and that goes back to the whole marketing aspect of this, right? I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm skipping all over the place at this point, but at the end of the day, all sales are technically, you could make an argument that a 3DI sail is a paneled sail. It's just a paneled sail that's made on a 3D mold versus, you know, individual panels that are then, you know, stuck together to sort of try to make that three-dimensional shape. So yeah, it was super cool, and now it's still very cool, but everybody else has got something cool. So let's see. You know, we always used to joke, and this was, you know, 10 years ago, that you buy sails in blue bags, and then if you can't, you figure out who's the best to work with. And that goes back to, again, the marketing. And that was, again, the fact that originally 3DI was a complete revolution in sail making. It was innovative. There was nothing else like it, you know, with the filaments being the way they were made into the tapes to lay everything out. That was it. And, you know, again, that delta is changing now. Good example of that is the spread filament, right? That was what we're talking about, is what, you know, so the whole idea was that they're actually taking individual filaments. So think of a filament as essentially a hair, right? And they're laying them out and making these tapes that they're building the sails out of. I don't know how many of you use Facebook, but if you look at, for instance, Ballard Sails Facebook page today, they posted a picture of their, they're calling it Tyraply, which is a dimension cloth, which is that spread filament technology. It's not, again, it's obviously not made as a 3D mold, but it is that same basic technology as 3DI. So there are other products becoming available. And then this will go back again to what I was talking about, you know, getting the boat set up and getting it right, because though the difference in technology, you're not going to win strictly because you have, you know, a North Sail versus a Quantum versus an Ullman. And, you know, they're just not at the level that we're at. And I mean, if that were the case, then why would Quantum sails keep winning the TP52 stuff, right? I mean, Quantum's winning TP52 and North's out there on a lot of boats as well. So, you know, is it that the Quantum sails are better, or they'd have a better boat, they're sailing better, the crew is better? You know, those are all of the things that are going to play into that. So, you know, as I was just talking about, you know, we talked about, so I'll just read this definition from North's website. Spread filament is what is making the difference. A spread filament tape is an individual yarn that has been spread out until the individual filaments lay side by side, forming an ultra-thin tape. This exclusive technology enables 3DI sails to be made from fiber and adhesive only without the need for mylar. Now that's off of North's website. Yeah.
So the difference between that and the old tape drive sails is that there's just no mylar.
Correct. Yeah, the mylar was always the weak spot, right? You know, we had a 3DL sail on our Andrews 53, and near the end of its life, you know, it was like Christmas. Every time we tacked, it snowed, and it was the mylar coming off of it. It was very festive at the right time of year. So the spread filament technology, but, you know, as we talked about, you've got Tyraply from Dimension, and then One Sails in Europe has their 4T Forte, which is another similar technology with the spread filament, that the way that they're building the sails. So again, that technological gap is narrowing, and that's going to be the key piece that will help you when you decide if you're going to be buying sails, where to buy them from. Yeah. Here.
What do you think you have a sense of the cost difference? I mean, North has been able to have a pretty significant cost or, you know, price differential for everybody else. Do you have a sense of what that amounts to? I mean, are they 10% higher, 20% higher?
So when I've been comparing them side by side, we've been finding North to be about 15% more. Now, I will say we get a pretty good discount sometimes on sales, and that's volume buying. So that's not the best example. But
yes, I'm definitely going to be buying 36.
Yeah, yeah. But again, like sort of the, you know, the key piece is that, you know, it's again, it goes back to the marketing. They're able to charge a premium because of a superior marketing machine. And, you know, as these other technologies and these other cloths from other manufacturers become available, you know, the Dimension Polyant, their tie reply, it's new and it's not yet, I mean, it's ready for mainstream, but it's not, they haven't been able to scale it up. So it's for 40 feet and under. You know, they haven't been able to scale it up. They're not making it for maxis and super yachts and things like that. So, you know, that technology is evolving. They're still playing a certain amount of catch up to North because, I mean, North sells themselves as a technology company and they've invested piles of money into R&D. And so that's why, again, combined with a marketing machine, they're able to do this and charge that premium. Now, we'll get to it a little bit, but, you know, well, I'll jump down there now. One of the things that factor into sales, and when you look at sales, and I mean, you know, ask questions as we go, but sales are only as good as the care you give them. And the one thing that is nice about the North sales is they because they're building them on a 3D mold, they do a very good job of holding their shape. I mean, the North sails are out of the bag. I mean, in no wind, they're in a sail shape, right? They're essentially, the 3DI sails are almost like a rigid sail, but they're not. You know, when you try to fold them, you think they might be sometimes. Well, we've had some, you know, I'm thankfully done with Genoas, but you know, we had a Genoa on the Andrews, and I mean, it was just a nightmare to carry that thing around. And you know, my new nightmare is our masthead Genoa, but we'll get to that when we get to specialty sails. But you know, it is a difference, and sails are only as good as you take care of them. The longevity of the North sails is pretty impressive. And, you know, what did I highlighted a term here that I thought was really cool when I found it. Sorry, I didn't, performance durability. And I liked that phrase because it doesn't talk about necessarily the durability of the sails, right? Because we've all seen people out there with 20-year-old Dacron sails that are still having a great time sailing around a race course or sailing around the lake, having a phenomenal time. But the performance durability of that sail has passed, right? That's the idea that, you know, your Dacron sails have stretched, or your, you know, your old UK tape drive, you can place your hand through it in certain places and play with the little, you know, filaments and things like that. So performance durability is a factor when you purchase sails. The 3DI sails will hold their shape longer because, again, they were all made on a 3D mold. So you have to factor that in, and you do your decision calculus on, okay, so if I'm going to pay 20% more for this jib, but it's going to last 3 years longer, is that a better investment for me than, you know, this cheaper jib that I'm going to use for 2 or 3 seasons? I mean, we're happy if we can get 2 years. We can get 2 good seasons out of our, you know, J15. You know, we're feeling pretty good about that because it's sort of our all-purpose jib in Puget Sound. You know, like everybody else, we take jibs well past their range sometimes because it's like, the turning mark's a mile up the course. We're not peeling now. Let's suck it up and we'll feel sorry for the jib later. And so, you know, the North sails are going to handle that a lot better than some of the paneled sails and some of the other brands. So there is that advantage to the 3DI technology, and that's durability.
Is there a difference between durability and, or a relationship between durability and weight?
Definitely, right? Because that goes back to, like I was saying about race boats, you know, if it's overbuilt, it's heavy, and heavy is, you know, bad. And so you can always make a sail lighter, but that comes at the cost of something. And in this case, that's going to be material. So yes, you can build lighter sails than North, but you're taking something out of them to do that. And, you know, yeah, I mean, yes, there's definitely a weight factor that plays into that.
And does increased strength just means you keep adding taffeta or whatever they call it?
Well, no, it wouldn't be the taffeta. Taffeta's, you know, so Mylar we've got rid of, right? And most of these technologies have moved past Mylar. Taffeta is sort of the new sort of for abrasion resistance. It's the part that goes on the outside. It's not necessarily structural. You know, the structural elements are the tapes that are in there. The taffeta on the outside now is what you're putting in for sort of the UV protection or the abrasion protection. You know, it's the part that stops it, you know, getting chewed up on the stanchions every time you tack or, you know, something like that. So, you know, and, you know, like North has their 3DI Raw, which is that without anything else in it. It's just the performance elements with nothing else. I mean, it is not durable, but it is wicked fast.
Possibly a dumb sounding question, what replaced?
No, it's on. I can see it's good.
What replaced the Mylar?
Taffeta. Taffeta's been the biggest. Well, what replaced the Mylar was sort of this filament technology, right? So it became unnecessary to have the Mylar because you were, the Mylar was basically the base that you stuck everything onto. And so you don't need that anymore, that you have these structural pieces, these structural tapes. So it wasn't so much.
Tapes are just connected to each other?
Yeah.
Without any substrate?
Yeah, because the filaments themselves are, they run the filaments essentially through the thermoset glue. And so each filament is essentially its own, for lack of a better description, its own piece of prepreg. And so you're going to basically cure it with heat and, with pressure. And so again, you need less of, there is no Mylar in a 3DI sail. It's resin and fibers. And so, yeah, that sort of went away. And so it wasn't that Mylar was replaced, it just became less necessary. And now we're looking at things like taffeta sort of, again, for UV and abrasion protection.
So, the last jib I bought, I ended up buying a North 3DI jib. I had a long discussion with the old men, the North guys.
Yep.
And one of the things that they all made apparent to me is the threads per inch, or the TPI for multi-hull sails, is a lot higher than it would be for monohulls. So the last jib that I bought from Ullman had a very low thread count, and it blew out after 18 months. And I think the other reason I went for North is one of the biggest changes is, I would say, it eliminated Mylar. The biggest difference is that the glue has changed. The glue they used to use for, standard sails was a 2-part glue that would eventually become 2 parts again. But North seemed to have this thermoset stuff that once it's set, stays as one piece. It never returns back to its 2-part component. And so our previous boat was in Dubai, and crazy humidity, crazy heat, and Mylar sails would just start delaminating after 18 months. So that was my big thing. But I'm really happy with the 3D. It's performance is just amazing.
And I mean, the key piece in all of this is that everybody can make a bad sail. Nobody is infallible. Anybody can make a bad sail. We know that Boeing can tell you that there is no 100% production run. So, when you have a sail that delams after 18 months, I'm not entirely sure that's the material. Maybe it's the design. I mean, you can have more DPI, it's just more cloth, it's heavier. And so,
And the maintenance as well. Maybe we didn't rinse it enough.
Yeah. And again, and again, with multi-hulls, yeah, absolutely. Because you're always, similar to us now with a bowsprit, you're always going upwind. You're never really off the breeze. And so the sails, they really are working harder. And so, yeah, I would say that, anybody can make a bad sail, and that one was probably just a miss, so, you can, you look at that next time and make sure, hey, it's a multi-hull, can we build it a little, stronger? I want it to last. And you have to have those conversations with your sailmaker. No, I want a jib for this regatta. It needs to get me out there and back, and it can destroy itself on the way in as long as we're done with the race, right? Or I want a jib, overbuild it. I want it to last 5 years. And that's all part of that conversation.
The deal with North is they've always had the multi-hull division out of San Diego. And, they advertised that for 20 years. So I think that's a good thing. And we've had North sails before, and they're pretty good. They're expensive. So.
I recently got a new Doyle jib, and in the process of ordering a jib, it was very interesting because I got a quote, and I saw the TPI, but the number didn't mean anything to me. So I inquired a little bit further, and it went from 10 to 14,000 threads per inch in the course of that discussion. That's a big change.
Yeah. And again, and that's, I'm getting down there now and moving away from sort of talking about the specifics of the sail technology, because really my takeaway from this when I started researching this was I had visions of making a big multimedia presentation. And then I realized that everything that I was finding was YouTube videos that any of you could go online, and there was no reason for us to watch videos together. You could all do that on your own time, and I could just sit here and talk, and here we are. But, again, that, moving past the sales, and like Vince is talking about now, is what I think is the more important part, is building that relationship with a sailmaker. And, well, let me talk about, first let's talk about specialty sails before we get to the generic idea. One of the biggest innovations, and actually, credit to Doyle, they led the way on this, was this new cableless technology where, your reaching sails no longer have those anti-torsion cables. It goes back to the structured luff. So essentially, the load bearing is built into the luff of the sail, so you don't end up with the big anti-torsion cables. So one of the sails that we purchased we're calling it an R1. It's essentially a masthead Genoa. It goes at the end of our bowsprit. It sheets way in the back of the boat. It's massive. I mean, the top end of this sail is 7 true, but in 5 true, we're doing 8.5 knots of boat speed. What made that possible, and again, this is the part of with the relationship with the sail loft, what made that possible was this structured luff technology, because it decreases so much of the sprit loads, because you still have to have the 2-to-1, but you have substantially less, 60% less tip load on the sprit using the structured luff technology. And so one of the things that we did before Pack Cup, was it Pack Cup or Transpac? Transpac, was we did a reset. And this is about the building the relationship part. We did a reset where we sat down with our sailmaker at Doyle. We sat down with Reichel Pugh, who designed the boat, and we sat down with Greg Stewart at Nelson Merrick, who does all of our rating analysis for us. And we said, blank slate, you can't change the boat, you can't change the mast, but everything else is game. And Greg Stewart at Nelson Merrick came back and said, well, if your sprit was 2 feet longer, you would be able to carry these sails and it would do this to your rating, and there would be, massive amounts of benefit. And we're like, great. Okay. Justin at Doyle, and he sails with us. He's a great guy. Like, okay, this is where the sprit's going to end up. We need to know what the tip load is going to be. Okay, the tip load is going to be 4,000 kilograms at max angles. Okay, Reichel Pugh, we need to extend our bowsprit out by 2.5 feet, and this is the anticipated tip load at the end of the bowsprit. And so then they were able to, generate the layup schedule to extend our bowsprit out just over 2.5 feet. And so it was that circle. And that's the biggest takeaway for me over these last few years. We've had some just phenomenal people on the boat. I mean, I talked Peter Eisler into doing a delivery to San Francisco. I mean, we've had some phenomenal people. And Justin Ferris at Doyle, he's won like 5 Volvo Ocean races. And, our Bauman's on the America's Cup team. I mean, we've got some great people. And the biggest thing I've learned in all of this process is, first off, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And then secondly, the collaboration, that you cannot make a lot of these decisions in a vacuum. You can't decide, okay, I want to make my sprit 3 feet longer. For what? What's going there, and what is the load that's going to be on there? Or I want to get a massive new mainsail. Okay, does the mast take it? Is the mast set up for it? What is the rating impact to this? These are all the things that you have to factor in when you make these decisions, because they're not small purchases. I mean, even at our level, right? It's not like the owner's sleeping on a mattress full of $100 bills and it's like, here, have a mattress, go buy what you want. We got to make good decisions and justify that for the time and expense that it takes to do these things. And so I'm getting to the fun part now. So we talked about the structured luff, the cableless technology. I think on multi-hulls in particular, that's going to be a pretty cool thing, because you're going to be able to carry a lot of different sails with a lot less tip load.
So on that subject, obviously, a lot of the F-boats, the Corsairs, carry a screecher.
Yep.
And it's always been a pain in the ass to get that torsion cable. And it seems like a perfect application. But the other thing they're promising, other than lose the torsion cable, is a straighter luff.
Mm-hmm.
And in your, obviously you don't have any other sail to compare it to. Are you getting a relatively straight luff or straighter than you would otherwise have assumed?
Absolutely. And part of that, of course, is that you're not, when you have, I mean, you guys probably all have sails with anti-torsion cables, for the furling sails and stuff like that, or you've seen them. You have an anti-torsion cable that you attach the sail to. So if you pull that torsion cable tighter, it's not necessary, the sail's getting incrementally tighter. It's not the torsion, there's not a lot of stretch, you're just loading things up, but you're attaching the sail to the anti-torsion cable, right? With the structured luff, there's nothing else in there. If you make it tighter, it gets tighter. And, you have to have a 2-to-1 for us. For us, we've got a 2-to-1 because all of our halyards are on locks. And so, everything's adjusted at the bottom, not at the top. But yes, we're definitely getting a much nicer entry on that sail, which is why, again, the top end of that R1 is, like I said, 7, and then we can go to a fractional version of that sail.
Are you using those things that measure the load, those little
Oh, those Cyclops ones?
Cyclops or other load sensors?
The only load cell we have is a 4-state load cell, so it wouldn't really be applicable in this sense, but we've sailed it enough now that we're, pretty confident we know what it wants to look like. We've marked things, everything's, all the tack lines are marked, because the tack lines are marked for hoisting the sails because you want to be able to get on lock. If you had it all down, boned on tight at the bottom, you would never be able to get on lock. And so we have a hoisting mark on our tack line, and then the tack lines have an R1 mark. We don't have marks for, just normal downwind A sails because you're going to be adjusting that for the most part, depending on the sail. But, there's definitely a lot to play with there. But for the most part, you're bringing it on, getting the luff shape that you want and sailing it.
So when you furl these things, I've wondered about that because you don't have any furling impetus at the head. The only furling impetus is at the tack.
Yep.
So are you getting this sort of washcloth look? I mean, is the sail sort of wrung out when you...
No, we've played with that a lot, and we've found 2 things. First off, again, you will always get a crappy furl if there's not enough luff tension. But the other thing that we have played with a lot is keeping some downforce on the sheet as much as possible as the sail furls. Now we'll furl, we furl our sails on the primaries because they're driven by the grinders. So we can just put the furling line on a primary and just smoke it and just furl it up as fast as we can ease the sheet. And, as long as someone's keeping a little bit of down pressure on it, it always furls better than if we don't. But sometimes it's just like, just furl it up, get it out of the way, get it off, get it out of here. But yeah, definitely, I haven't seen any of those issues, but I've also seen those, what you're describing, I've seen those issues with those anti-torsion cables too, that, it'll furl at the top and not at the bottom. And, you get a different shape there. But, everything's on a continuous line furler. And so you just keep furling it till it's out of the way, right? It's got, ours has 4 or 5 feet of, 2-foot wide Velcro on it. So when it closes up, it stays closed up. So yeah, that is a factor, but I think it's become less of a factor now.
So I put a masthead, effectively as our North Helix masthead flying jib. I think they call it Helix Code 55 on my 28R. No problems throwing it. It was great up there.
Yep.
And it was on a 3-to-1. So it was on a, so the halyard was a 1-to-1, but the tack was a 3-to-1.
Oh, wow.
No problem.
So you're doing masthead, but the thing goes to the hounds, so you've got 8 feet unsupported mast, and you're cranking on, so,
I put runners on them.
all right. And then the same question as far as the torsion rope, so, in a lot of the F boats anyway, so no backstay, caps are usually pretty loose. And so I'm just a little curious as to whether or not, that gain you get from having, the structured luff and getting that finer entry is really beneficial when you really have a hard time, keeping that tension on.
The biggest problem I had was I would build the parent so fast that I would have to barrel it. So
Makes sense.
so BMG was still great, but I couldn't point the size I wanted. He was super light wind. I would just build wind, I build speed and then bear away, no matter how tight I did the luff.
And then you were still furling every time you tacked.
And we had to furl into
Yeah.
And so my normal jib, I think was 16 square meters, and the sail was 44 square meters.
Great light air.
Yeah, and again, I mean, remember, as part of that, as you're talking about the runners and things like that, remember that, part of the advantage of the structured luff technology, and, like we're saying, North's calling it Helix, everybody's, again, it's all marketing, it's all the same technology, but, again, with the decreased loads on the tip, then you're affecting everything else less because you just generally got less load on that piece of the sail.
So you're bending the boat less.
But yeah, I mean, if the boat
Okay,
bends,
bending
it
the
shouldn't.
base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, I remember we had a McGregor 65. You could put too much backstay on and lock people in the head.
So this idea of a masthead giant Genoa, I asked this question on the airport list, and replied, no problem. But I've been wondering about the helm balance. You're adding a lot of area forward of where the normal upwind setting would be. Not a problem.
I balanced it with a 60% fat head main. So I
So yeah, I'm definitely gonna, I just kind of extend that one back,
Vince is
some
seeing
extra
dollar
stuff on
signs.
there.
the top of my main was over 2 meters. But we were very, very likely to look out. But saying that, even in 20 knots of wind, I wouldn't reef. It was the boat still about the wind just spilled out in.
Remind me not to bring him in the boat, man.
But again, I mean, you can always balance sail plans out in different ways, either more main or more main sheet.
Hey, Nigel,
Yeah.
Jess our house here. I know you asked for this to be a discussion forum, and I think there's some folks at home that might want to ask.
Oh,
some
good. I didn't
questions
know
or
how to do
Q&A.
that. Yeah.
So if you would raise your hand via Zoom, we can call on you. By the way, Bill, all 17 of us in the room can see your comments, so that's fun. Thank you for that. Did you have a question? You in gallery. Yeah, I think put it in gallery now.
Nobody looks white. The sails look white.
Oh,
That's great.
The comments from Bill were pretty good. Let me see.
No, it's all good.
Okay.
Anyone raising their hand?
Yeah, if people want to turn their cameras on and raise their hand if they have any questions or anything to input.
Be sure to unmute yourself.
Can you make it so we can see their chat a little bit?
I could try. It's gonna cut off this side though, because it pivots.
Oh, I see.
It can't, the projector should technically be like a foot further back.
Leila is standing on a chair.
Hey, nice.
She's not
So
wearing heels.
some people are cut off in the corner, but
Okay, well, then, so this kind of brings me up to the second part that I was talking about, which is how do you go about buying sails and building a relationship with a sail loft? And there was an example that I came across, a local guy, and this is the building a relationship with a sail loft. Unfortunately, for as many boats as we see around here, Seattle is sort of a dead zone when it comes to sail lofts. When you look around, there's no Quantum loft, there's no Doyle loft. You've got Ullman and Anacortes, you've got UK up in, Vancouver, you've got Norths in Seattle, you've got Ballard sails, but we're really lacking in the big name brand lofts, and it's kind of surprising. So a big part of what you need to do is you need to find a way to build a relationship with your sail loft. The example I came across of a boat in our yard was a guy that was very upset that he had gone to Catalina Direct to buy a mainsail for his boat, which Catalina Direct sells sails, but they're essentially Ullman sails. He had bought this sail. He's like, I got a Catalina 36. I need a sail. It came, he hoisted it, and it was short, and he couldn't figure out why. And he went back to them, and they're like, nope, that's a Catalina 36 sail. What he didn't know was he had a Catalina 36 tall rig. And so that goes back to, sort of that building a relationship. You can buy sails from anybody. You could buy sails from One Sails on the East Coast, or, a boutique loft in Italy or wherever. But if you don't have that loft support, then you're in charge of measuring. And so if you feel confident that you can get good measurements, as the sail makers do, and build the sails to it, then you can do a lot of things. Now, one of the other important pieces about building that relationship with a sail loft was when we brought the Reichel Pew out here, it came with a full set of North sails, and we sailed it for a couple of months before we realized that all of the jibs were useless for our waters. And a big part of that is Puget Sound is somewhat unique in the sense that when you're racing on the East Coast or, in California, everything is essentially offshore. So when the wind goes light, you still have to contend with a bit of a swell. And so the sails need a little bit of depth to them to deal with that. In Puget Sound, when it goes light, it goes flat. So you can have flatter sails that are more powerful. And so one of the reasons we got rid of all of those jibs was that they were so deep because the light jibs had to contend with a big rolling sea state that we were just dragging these sails around the race course. We couldn't flatten them out, and we couldn't point with anybody. So when I talk about building a relationship with a sail loft, it's important that that conversation, much like Vince was talking about with, the DPI changing on his sails, you have to, if they're not local, you have to explain to them that, for all intents and purposes, you're sailing on a lake. And, that's what I have discovered is the best way to describe to people in New Zealand, Puget Sound. They look at it like, oh my God, it's bigger than San Francisco Bay. But you have to consider it a lake because of the sea state. It's flat water. So that's a big part of buying sails, is building that relationship. For me personally, the part of that relationship is, our masthead Genoa, or the R1, I think the thing is 200 pounds. I mean, the thing is massive, right? I mean, our kites, they're light, right? The nylon and stuff like that. But our spinnakers our A4 is 308 square meters. The R1, I think, is 190 square meters, and it's a reaching cloth, right? So it's a heavy, heavy sail. It's like hauling a body bag around. I mean, it's just a horrible sail to move. But again, part of my loft support is being able to be like, hey, can you come pick up the R1? And I tore it on a stanchion, picks it up, brings it back to me. It's repaired. They run my credit card. That's part of that support that you need to have. And that's part of, that relationship building. If you're working with somebody that can't give you the time of day because you're only going to spend $2,000 on a sail, then move on. Somebody else will give you the time of day. And that's an important piece of this puzzle, because you need those people that are going to help you with making sure the sails fit. And I said, anybody can make a bad sail. So once you go up there, if they're not coming sailing with you, every time we've gotten new sails, the sail makers have come sailing with us so they can see the sail up. If you don't have that sail maker locally, you're going to end up sending them photographs. If you don't look at sails all the time, you might not look at the sail and be like, sail looks great to me. But you send the picture to somebody else, and like, what the hell's wrong with your jib? Why is the entry so far aft? So that's part of that relationship building, that you need to have somebody that is willing to spend the time with you, like Vince was, researching his sails to determine what you should have for the waters that you have and the conditions that you're going to sail in.
So on that subject, you mentioned Justin Ferris at
Yep.
Doyle. He was the guy who did my jib, and he gave me amazing service from New Zealand.
Yep.
Helped me measure that thing, had a model of the boat, a CAD model of the boat, was able to tell me, well, if you add, half an inch to the forestay, we'll add this much to your mast weight. And it was amazing. Now, I don't know if you guys call up Justin Ferris or call up Doyle generally, what you're gonna get that service, but I was amazed because I'm not a big sail buyer. So I bought one other Doyle sail, something like 7 years ago. And he was still there.
Yeah.
It was astonishing.
Yeah. And I mean, Justin's a good guy. And, you'll find that service level. You should find that service level with anybody, regardless of what you're purchasing. I mean, you should have that service level with your sails. And I mean, Justin's been fantastic to work with for us as well. And I mean, that's great to hear, because I think he's a nice guy. I mean, other than being a Kiwi, he's a good guy. I like to say that he's a very well-balanced Kiwi because he has a chip on both shoulders. So, we talked about sort of some of that other stuff with the loft support. Another key piece in this, when you buy new sails, is making sure your boat is set up for it. Every time we have bought a new mainsail, we have two mainsails currently, two racing sails. We have an inshore main and an offshore main. And we have developed tuning guides for our mast for those sails. So anytime you buy a new sail, you are going to have to change something in your boat, right? You've got a new jib now, so you're pointing higher. You need to, make sure that your, backstays are up to the task, or your forestay is good enough to, take all of the extra loads. Or, do you have to retune your main or your mast to take the shape of this new mainsail, whether it's the inshore main or an offshore main or just your all-purpose main or whatever, So setting up the boat is part of that support that you should be getting. And, technology again has really helped us with this because, you were probably able to do video calls with Justin while you were on your boat. And, that technology is widely available if the people have the time to do it with you. So
I want to add one extra loft. Obviously, probably a lot of us have bought sails from Ballard Sails and they've been great. But there's also a guy over in Port Angeles, Taylor Sails. And for anybody he's got an F-24, he did some beautiful sails for an F-24 that sails out of Port Townsend. So, and he's a one-man guy. He does panel sails, but he's really good.
yeah. And again, like I said, anybody can make a bad sail, which means the converse would be anybody can make a great sail. So, if you work with the right people and you get the right information and it's, there's a dialogue that's happening, you can get great product from anybody if you're willing to take the time to work that. Is there something?
Isn't there a trend towards sail ops just finishing sails too? So for instance, the last main I bought was seamed and everything in Italy, comes to the United States and it's finished off by the loft. So
Yep.
we're less purchasing.
Definitely. And then, part of that is right with, for instance, with North, with the 3DI sails, it's not like Jack's going to be able to put a 3D mold upstairs at fisheries or, so a lot of these, laminate sails like this are, made in main production facilities and then, like you said, shipped to the lofts for the finishing details. And I mean, I think really, honestly, that's probably just the cost of the technology, right? You can't have a big production facility in every city. You're going to, at some point, sails are going to be having to be finished somewhere other than locally. I mean, or built somewhere other than locally, just because of the massive, investment in that technology for making that 3D molds or, you've got these presses with heat and stuff like that. That's not, that's not technology that you're going to put upstairs at fisheries. That's going to be in a custom built facility. In North's case, it was Nevada because land's cheap. I mean, that's sort of the reasoning for some of that stuff. But those finishing details, I mean, at the end of the day, that's still a real sailmaker that's touching your sails, right? That's a real person that's sewing in the batten pockets or putting the little bumpers on the front of the sails, where the sail goes up so it doesn't, chew up the track on the mast. I mean, those are important and unique details that have to get finished out on every sail.
So back to the batten pockets. So the thing I was surprised about is that the batten pocket. So batten pockets are integral to the fabric. So is that a new trend?
That's more, again, back to the idea of the laminate sails. So they're building that into the sail as part of that laminate process. And again, part of that as well is, the sail itself, when a sail is designed and modeled out, it's designed and modeled out with battens, with batten tension on them, right? It's not that, when you look at the 3D pictures that you get from the sail, I should have brought some of my sail quotes, but if you look at those 3D pictures, yeah, it doesn't look like there's batten pockets, but the assumption is that some of that shape is coming from those battens. So again, that's sort of more about the build process now. You're not sewing externally on because you're essentially back to trying to make a rigid sail out of a soft material. And sails are wings, right? So you're looking at the flow. So if you can have a smoother flow because that batten pocket is integral to the shape of the sail, then you're building a better shape right out of the gate. And battens themselves, I think our battens for our main were around $8,000. Battens themselves, there's technology involved in those. North does not make their own battens. They use RBS, but, there's glass battens, there's carbon battens, and, there's different battens for different purposes in different sails. So, that's got to be something that you factor into the price of a sail as well.
I see a comment in the chat here, somebody says, so that looks like Paul. I work with Doyle in Linwood, that Doyle loft in Linwood closed, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the only Doyle loft, I mean, I think that Dan Kessler with Raptor Sales is technically a quantum loft, but I don't know if he is. And the Doyle loft was out there was Josh Butler, he's not there anymore. He moved inland, Colorado, I think. So the other part of all of this is, you know, when I talked about how we redid our sale plan working with, you know, Nelson Merrick for the rating optimization. Another part of this, and Vince got to some of this as well, when he was talking about, well, if you made your forestay half an inch longer, and he probably didn't say half an inch because he refuses to use anything other than the metric system as he should. That, you know, part of that is building sails and looking at your sail plan relative to the rating system that you're sailing under. There's a movement around here, at least in the monohull fleet, to move towards ORC, which also has a very good multi-hull rating system. So more and more, we're looking at sails specifically for,
Just keep talking, you're good.
we're looking at, you know, we're getting our sails designed to specific rating systems. It's hard because we race ORC here, but we race to Hawaii. So we do have some sails that we will not carry in Puget Sound because of the rating impact relative to the ORR rule, but that's all starting to blur together a little bit. So again, I guess keep coming back to this idea that you shouldn't be purchasing sails in a vacuum. You should see them as a bigger part of a system. Your boat is a system, the sails are the engine, but they shouldn't be just purchased like, I need a new jib. Okay, well, what do you want that jib to do? We just purchased a new jib because, you know, we had too big of a gap between the top end of our J15 and the bottom end of our 3. So we wanted something that fit in between. And so, you know, when we were talking with Doyle, I told him pretty much, I want a sail that's good from, you know, the bottom end of it's about 9, and I want the top end of it to be 16. And Justin's like, yeah, okay, I can do that. And so, you know, we looked at that, and we looked at the shapes, and we looked at the sizes. That comes into play more when you're talking about sort of the specialty sails, your main sail sizes, your spinnakers and things like that. You know, I mean, what do you guys race? Is it PHRF still? Yeah. So I can't make sense of that anymore. I've stopped trying. But I mean, you know, again, you know, that's got a lot of, every rule is exploitable. I mean, that's part of the fun for me, is trying to find loopholes in rules, right? I mean, you know, one of my favorites.
It's still showing.
One of my favorites was the, you know,
I
the
know,
rule
it's
about
just-
sag in your lifelines. You know, you can have 2 inches of sag in your lifelines, but the way that the rule was written, it didn't expect that I thought that meant that could be 2 inches of sag between each stanchion. So if you go to discontinuous lifelines and actually had each section between each stanchion be its own independent lifeline, you can have 2 inches of sag between every stanchion. Well, yeah, you can't anymore, but it was a great idea at the time. So again, you know, purchasing sails is trying to find, you know, the sweet spot in your rating, and that's looking at your PHRF and saying, hey, what is maximum code 6? And a better question relative to your boat is, do I want maximum code 6? And, you know, that's all part of that sort of not purchasing the sails as an independent vacuum piece, as part of a sale for your rating, as part of a sale to fill a gap in your inventory or what you wanted to do. And that's, again, that's some of these specialty sales, like our R1. We don't carry that inshore. It's 3.5 minutes an hour and what it costs us to carry that sail. And when we're racing the TP52s in a, you know, an 1.5-hour buoy race, there's not 3 minutes between all 5 of us. So I've given them a 3.5-minute head start before we even crossed the start line. So we don't carry that sail as much in Puget Sound anymore now that we've looked at all of these things.
So just to give you an idea how rough the multi-hull ratings are, I'm the rated.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So everybody buys, so Vince doesn't pay for drinks is what I'm hearing.
So not only that, we don't even rate screechers. We're like, well, that's some kind of weirdo sail. If you want to sail that, we don't want to care about it. We look at spinnaker, jib, and main,
Right.
and that's it.
Well, and I mean, just
But the question then arises, if I do get a giant ass masthead general effectively, what is that? It's not a reaching sail. It's not really a specialty sail. I mean, it's something else.
Yeah.
Rating system.
Well, so far, I must admit that we've been the only multi-hull of the regattas we've been doing, so we're waiting for more.
I know, I look around this room, it's like, why are you, I see all these people and people online, but don't see this number of boats.
Yeah, I mean, like, THRF is gonna be meaningful when there will be 10 of us. Like, if we were alone, we don't care.
Right. Right, that was like, when we got a PHRF rating for, the Reichel Pew, we went to the PHRF committee, they're like, no idea. Like, how's 100 minus 120 sound? Whoa, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I'm trying to express that I don't care. I need this for the Blakely Rock Benefit Regatta. And they settled on minus 102. And they're like, you okay with that? I'm like, again, I don't care, but fine. Minus 102 is great. We'll take it and we'll sail with it. But, so the one thing that is nice about ORC, and this is just a tangent when we were talking about your Screecher, because it is computer modeled, if we have our R1 and we're carrying it on a random leg course, like a triangle, like you were showing earlier, there's going to be a huge rating impact to that sail. But if we're doing a windward-leeward race and the wind band is 20 knots, the rating impact of that sail is negligible because the computer's already determined there is no way that I am flying that sail. So I'm taking a rating hit that's tiny just for having it on board and the off chance that I might use it as a heavy air kite or something like that. But there's an assumption that, the computer's figured out that on a windward-leeward course, that sail's not coming out of the bag and it's sure not coming up on deck. So
The deception that there would be a computer model for an F-25. Wrong mate.
But I mean, I assume it would be the same for multi-hulls, but when you get an ORC rating, you get, a set of polars that they generate for the vessel, right? So, I mean, we have our own polars and if you think that a polar chart is static, then you're way off. A polar chart is a suggestion. It's not even a goal. It's like it's an idea of what you should be able to do, and you should be constantly doing that. Just like calibration of your electronics, it's never done. And your polar chart is always changing. We've got inshore polars, offshore polars, polars for different sea states. I mean, there is so many factors that play into that.
On those polar that upwind sails are in upwind component, downwind sails with downwind.
Yeah.
So you get that smooth chart, but it assumes on this downwind.
Yeah, and and you can plug in, because you upload your sail chart as part of that. So you can plug in sails and you can take them, with a check of a box, you can take them out and they come out of the polar chart. And it's actually an interesting way to find gaping holes in your sail inventory. Like all of a sudden, like, I don't have a sail to fly at 120 degrees. I should get one. And so we did.
Fred, we need to upgrade our electronics.
Sorry?
I was saying to Fred, we need to upgrade our electronics.
Yeah.
So because many of our boats have rotating masts, the electronics are often pretty rudimentary.
Mhm.
And we have one member, Bill Quigley, who is some kind of computer guy. And he's just come up with a mast rotation compensator, et cetera. There's continual discussion in forums about trying to get true wind.
I believe that
rotating masts.
I believe that I thought I saw when we were setting up our Hercules, our H5000 Hercules system, that did account for rotating masts.
It does.
Okay.
As long as you don't mind paying $5,000 extra for that.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, there was, when you go to the performance thing, there was a bunch of more even useless things. Like I don't really need to have aft depth because I don't do a lot of med ties and I don't have multiple wind instruments. But yeah, I it's out there, but there's probably got to be a better way to do it. And I'd be interested, I'd have to ask, I'll have to, the guy to talk to would be Matt Freeze at B&G and ask him, B&G's got that new Triton Edge, which is supposed to be in a way for a more entry-level use of B&G with polar charts and things like that. It'd be interesting if that had any compensation for rotating masts and things like that. Be interesting to see. So the last part, talked briefly about rating and getting, the last part I think is getting the boats ready for a lot of these new sails. Because when you start looking at things like 3DI, these molded sails, all of these sails, when you go to these new sails, the loads go up exponentially. The riding moment gets better, obviously, because, they're typically lighter. The sails, because they're stronger, when the gusts hit, the boat doesn't heel as much. It just kind of goes forwards. But, part of that is the exponential increase in the loads that you get with sails that don't have stretch. The same thing that happens when you have sheets and halyards that don't have stretch. That load's going somewhere, and hopefully it's going to be transferred into making the boat go forwards. But we've certainly found that when we increased our mainsail size, we had some issues, teething issues out of the gate when we, went big on the main with our mast track. We pulled it off the mast once, and so it's like, okay, let's fix that, and we've beefed it up enough that it's not an issue now. But that was sort of the last part. And again, like I talked about at the beginning, the technology delta between North and everybody else has narrowed. And I think for most people, unless you're at a full pro Grand Prix level, the sails are not going to win you the race. The boat prep and the crew work is what's going to win you the race. So I approach a lot of our racing as I like to be able to control every variable that I can before I leave the dock. So that when we're off the dock, all I'm thinking about is the race itself and the current conditions. And that's, getting my, depending on the regatta, whether we've paid for weather briefings ahead of time. We've used Chris Bedford a few times. Roger Badham, everybody calls him Clouds, out of Australia. The only issue he has is that he forgets which way the lows circulate in our hemisphere. But, it's as simple as looking at predict wind, or, making sure the bottom's clean. Do you have the right sails? Boats are so sensitive to weight. If you're going to go out there and it's going to be a race where the maximum pressure you're going to see is 14 knots, do you need to bring your, A4, your J4, things like that? No, you probably don't. When we looked at, Pacific Cup, a couple of years ago, whatever, one of the Pacific Cups we did, it was shaping up to be a pretty light air event. And so we left behind our A4, we left behind our R2, we left behind our J4. We did everything we could to shave weight out of the boat. We were going around the boat. And I mean, it was, sailing with people like Justin, you learn tons. He came down to the boat and I'm like, I'm feeling pretty good about how we're doing on boat prep. He's like, why are we bringing lifeline cushions? You plan on hiking to Hawaii? Shit, no, I'm not. All right, let's strip those off. And I was like, lifeline cushions with the foam, the canvas cover, the piece of PVC in the middle. When you got 4 of those per side, that added up. Why are we bringing all these winch handles? You plan on short tacking a beach on the way to Hawaii? No, I'm not. Okay, so half the winch handles came off of the boat. How many days are we going to be out there? I don't know, 8. Okay, well, why are we bringing 10 days worth of food? Bring 7. Okay, and so... so we did, and I mean, but that was all of the things that went into it. I mean, weight is so important on these boats. One of our biggest upgrades was we went to this, we had a custom alternator built that's, we've got a 75 horse Yanmar, but it's got a 220 amp alternator on it, which means that I'm carrying 6 gallons less fuel when I go to Hawaii now because I can charge the batteries that much faster. I mean, that's where we're kind of in the noise looking for the weight savings. And that goes back again to the boat prep and making sure that the boat's ready and it's going to take these new loads that you generate. Is the bob stay good if you're going to put this, big code sail on the end of your sprit? Is that all set up for that? Are the halyards and the 2-to-1s going to take these loads that you're going to generate? And, is your crew ready for this as well? I mean, if you're going to spend the money on sails, you should have the crew that can use those sails. So that's pretty much covered everything I had. I don't know where I ended up on time, but if anybody has any other questions, I did bring business cards because I tend to always end up generating more questions afterwards. So if you have other questions, please feel free to email me. I enjoy this. I mean, this is one of the things that kept me in sailing is that I'm never going to learn it all and I'm always going to learn something. And I've been very, very fortunate to sail with really smart people. So I do have a resource base to ask questions of, but I've also stuck with it because I keep learning. Yeah.
So what led to your decision to go with Doyle?
It was a couple of factors. At the time, it was, price was definitely a factor because we were able to purchase the sails with Kiwi pesos. And so that helped. And then the support that we had. Justin was sailing with us. He was designing the sails, and it felt like a very collaborative relationship with Doyle. And that was a big part of it. Doyle was, you know, they made very fast sails for quite similar boats to ours as well. You know, Justin was overseeing the build on Caro, which, you know, while it's a 52, it's a very, very powered up custom 52 with water ballast. So it had a lot more similarities to us. He had a good relationship with Reichel Pugh and with Nelson Merrick as we were doing that whole sort of redesign of our sail plan. You know, yeah, go ahead.
So it's not just the relationship with the sailmaker, it's the relationship with the community around your boat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, because it should be collaborative, and the more people you bring under the tent, the better decisions you're going to make, right? I mean, sometimes we committee things to death even still, but, you know, Carl, who's our bowman, you know, is on the AC program. You know, we don't make changes to the boat without running it past Carl just to like, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and we don't need this stuff anymore. You know, what do you think? He's like, yeah, great, get rid of it. Or like, hey, you know, do you really think we need a hydraulic outhaul? Could we go to a purchase? Would that be lighter? You know, and things like that. So, you know, yeah, it's definitely, you know, again, that goes back to that don't buy a sail in a vacuum. You're not just going to go buy a number 2 jib. Do you need a number 2? Should it be a 2.5? What range do you want it to, you know, cover? Instead of, I mean, for the most part, I think when you buy sails, you should focus less on the numbering system, which probably, again, was a marketing thing, right? We know that, you know, even numbered A sails are supposed to be the runners and the odd numbers are supposed to be the reachers. We focus less on that now and more on, you know, sales by ranges. Like we've got our 0 to 6. We've got a sail that's good from 6 to 11. We've got a sail from, you know, 9 to 15. So we're making sure that we're trying to get, you know, reasonable overlap, that the sails aren't being built unnecessarily heavy, and that we're covering all of those angles. And, you know, yeah, again, you know, you know, what's the number 2? I don't even know what that is anymore. I mean, what does that do around here, right? You know, you're looking for a sail that's going to do 8 to 15. You know, heck, you may as well just call that your all-purpose sail in Puget Sound.
Your new jib, is it a structured luff jib?
No, it's a standard to fit with the rest of them. And again, it was more about, you know, we currently are running a J15, really, when we sail offshore, we've got a J15, we've got an offshore J2 that just we can't use in Puget Sound. Again, it's very similar to the sails that came with the boat. It's deep, it's great offshore. When you're not going to be pointing, you can't because of the sea state. So we wanted a sail that went between the J15 and the J4 for Puget Sound in that sort of flatter water than we would find offshore, so that we weren't giving up the point, because there was nothing that we could do to point with the 52s in 14 knots of breeze. And that was where we were finding our weak spot. Anyone else? I missed anything online?
Yeah, can you read the chat? Sorry, the projector got tired. I don't know how I'll fix like.
Don't see any new ones on there.
How did it feel to have an F-25C ahead of you around the county?
Well, so it's funny. So the only time I've ever saw that, I mean, I think a guy named Jude was it Jude that had an F-25C? And I've seen him do some just crazy things with that boat back then. I mean, it's great. I mean, I like just going fast, and I'm assuming that's why all of you have multi-hulls. I mean, you're going to take epic speeds faster than we ever.
Was it a monohull that day?
Oh.
When I saw that boat going past us, I was like,
Yeah, you forgot. Yeah.
Because we own a F-25C.
Right.
But we got it too late to register for around the county. And when we saw him, we were like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, around the county this year was phenomenal. I mean, that was a good year, other than Sunday when we showed everybody where the hole was.
Thank you so much. I think that's probably good for the presentation. If people want to ask additional questions, go for it. But I think we're done. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your experience. It was really
Happy
good.
to.
Why don't you ask what's new at CSR lately? Can you?
Well, we're getting ready for a boat show. I mean, there's, around the county was good for us and bad for J105s. So we've got a lot of those in the yard right now. I've got a mast coming for one J105, a bowsprit coming for another one that went aground. Got a mast coming for a Beneteau 48 that thought it could get under the Port Townsend Canal Bridge and missed it by 9 feet.
Hey, what about that 880 that's been sitting there?
Yeah, we're making some progress. We've cut some holes into it. All the new pieces are being sent to us. That was Hardesty's boat.
What's ultimately the fix on that? Yeah.
I honestly don't know because I'm not PMing that boat, but as I understand it, the builders came back and basically are sending us all of the bulkheads and things to put it back together.
Whoa, replacing bulkhead.
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
So it's having systemic. and
Yeah.
it's having failure.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't just one piece. Yeah.
Interesting.
We're gonna go down there and take pictures of that motherfucker.
I liked it when they had turnaround. That was great. There's more off the list.
Well, I can't say that around the county on the J105 was amazing.
Oh, I bet. I mean, again, you're one design, right? So everything's always more fun. And I mean, got a love-hate relationship.
Constitution,
Yeah.
that was like, wow.
You're liking the frac kites. I mean, I've always, I got a love-hate relationship with 105s. I raced in that fleet for a long time when it was out here originally. And, it's kind of a dump truck. But I think about it just like a J24, right? Absolutely hate those boats, horrible boats. There's nothing good about them other than driving them. And even then it's not that great. But when you've got 20 of them,
That's fun.
yeah, exactly. And so when you've got 10 105s on the line, it doesn't matter if it's a dump truck because you got 10 dump trucks and it's, that's what makes it fun, right?
There's always one that is faster than
Yeah, and that's the best part about it is, racing is racing, right? Even when we're cruising, if you see another boat, you're racing them, whether they know it or not. So, that's the best part about one design. It doesn't care. As long as all the boats are the same, it's going to be great. Yeah.
Tell me what does CSR do?
It's a full service boatyard. So we do, we commission most of the new monohulls that you see in town, bottom paint, fiberglass, carbon work, mechanical installations, electronics, stuff like that.
New construction, or
We've done a few, but not really much anymore. We've had a couple projects like Kim Bottle's his Perry 66 that was, it's Francis Lee, but the design name at the time was Sliver. So that was built up in Port Hadlock at the Wooden Boat School and then came to us for, keel, deck hardware, all of that stuff to get installed. But you can't do new builds in the city of Seattle. It's just too expensive.
Can you describe your boat?
So boat that I captain, it's a Reichel Pew 55. So they actually did build 2 of them. This one though, when they built it, they put a slightly taller rig on it. They were 2 built, about 9 months apart. One went to Australia, so they put a shorter rig on it. They put the taller rig on our boat. And then, the idea was to have a boat that could race the 52s around the cans, so like buoy racing, and then crush them offshore. So it's got a lot more structure. So we're 5,000 pounds heavier than a TP52. So we weigh 20,000. The 52s are all coming in around 15.5, 16, somewhere in that range. Realizing that one of the changes was, okay, we need to take some weight out of the boat. So the easiest thing to do was to take 2,000 pounds out of the bulb, but then make the draft 4 feet deeper to keep the same riding moment. So we took 2,000 pounds out of the bulb and then went down 4 feet on the.
What did that do to your rate?
Oh God, I don't even know. But that's what the computers are for.
So what's the drop to the moment?
We're 14.
What's that in meters?
3.4, somewhere in there.
they don't care.
No, well, you say that, like there's nothing south of the Narrows that we can go to. I've wanted to go back down there. I used to love doing the Toledo Shoals race and, I can't find, I've looked at it. I've played with going to the the port there, but then you have to do that thing like you see in Europe where you have the board with the fenders on it because it's all pilings, and they said bring your own ladder, and like nope, skip that.
Will you just do me a favor and check the chat and see if anyone's asking?
Oh, I'm on it.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks, Stephanie.
Didn't see anyone. But yeah, so it's just it's a custom, it looks like a big TP52. So it's just an offshore version of a Transpac 52, basically. Spinnakers are 308 square meters, so it's got pretty good amount of sail area. We go to Hawaii typically with 10. It's pretty Spartan, you know, the head is a bucket and the galley is a jet boil.
They make that nice carbon sound. Oh,
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, and all of our, you know, all of our standing rigging is carbon as well. That was part of keeping the riding moment, was we went to the Future Fibers C6 for the standing rigging, which is literally just bundles of rods of carbon that are coated in a Tech 10 jacket now. So that took about 70% out of the weight of the rig. Yeah, you should look it up. Future Fibers. The new innovation now is, again, so when you look at like high performance sailing, like the America Cup stuff now, they're not really in the water anymore. So all of the drag now is air drag. So Future Fibers has taken it as far now as they actually have built airfoil shaped rigging. So, you know, that's what you're looking at now is the air drag. That's the reason when you look at the AC boats, the guys are sitting below deck on bicycles grinding. Right, everyone's on bicycles now. There's no pedestals left on the AC-75s. Everybody's yeah, aerodynamics. Yeah, yeah. At this point, that's the low hang. Yeah, yeah,
Let's say as
yeah,
it becomes a mixture of.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's always changing. It was built in 2012. And then went through a refit in 16. That was when we took the draft down. And then, yeah, and should be, it's in the yard at the moment out of the water. Because, you know, with the composite rigging, we have to send it back to get recertified. And so the rigging currently have to go in a 1.4 square meter box to Spain to get recertified and then sent back to us. And we'll put the rig back together at the end of the month.
You said take the draft down. Is that changing weight or?
Well, yeah, we took 2,000 pounds out of the bulb and then increased the draft 4 feet to keep the same riding moment. Well, got a whole new keel.
Yeah.
A whole new fin. Oh, yeah, no. I mean, it's all declared, right? Because, you know, we have to produce a 3D hull scan. So, you know, one of the problems with the one design, well, with one-off boats now is part of what they use to generate the rating is they have a hull file, and it's typically generated by the designer, and they use that to, you know, that's the performance curve. It's all extrapolated from those design files. The rating office started noticing that there's a pretty good disconnect between as drawn and as built. And so now on sort of these one-off, two-off runs, you can't use the designer files. You actually have to get a 3D scan of the boat done.
Okay, so assuming that there was so where was the benefit to you in doing that?
Because 2,000 pounds lighter was the idea that we would get on plane closer to when the 52s are getting on plane.
Okay.
So we would just, it was the easiest way to decrease the displacement of the boat.
And
there's nothing else I can cut out of it.
rating system wasn't gonna catch that.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, there's no way that you can hide, you don't want to hide it from the rating system, right? The whole.
No. I mean, it wasn't gonna catch the fact that you would now get on the plane faster and therefore penalize.
Oh, no, it will, because the displacement went down. So the boat is lighter with the same amount of horsepower. So the rating system is going to be like, okay, you've got the same amount of horsepower and you've got 2,000 pounds less boat. So it's going to be faster. You know, like the litmus. Yeah. You know, the litmus.
So I'm trying to get to where in that is the benefit to you? Why do you want, other than, hey, we're faster now, which is kind of a cool thing to be. Given that your rating would penalize you in theory for the improvement in your performance, how would you benefit from?
Sure. Well, so part of that is that the math and all of the VPPs, right? The velocity prediction programs that they use to take this when you're on a plane, the computer says, when I look at my polars, for instance, I can't remember what the number is. In 20 knots, I should be doing the polars say I should be doing 15 knots of boat speed and 20 knots of wind, right? But I'm not usually, right? I'm doing 12 and I'm doing 17s and I'm doing a 16 and I'm doing a 14, you know? So the idea is that if I'm on that plane, I'm able to you're always trying to sail past your rating. And so getting the boat on a plane faster gives me more latitude to sail past my rating.
Well, and not a big rating hit. I mean, I'm assuming you're looking for the advantage.
Oh, yeah. And that advantage is once I'm on a plane, I'm sailing past my rating when I'm on a plane, you know, but this,
That's the game, right?
Yeah.
The ratings reflect your ability to get on plane?
oh, they do. They absolutely do, but they don't affect, it can't look at the sea state and all the, you know, it can't anticipate all of the waves. It can't anticipate how well we're trimming, right? You know, if I bring the bow up to get on a plane, my trimmer is going to keep up with the kite to bring the kite in as I come up. And then as I bear off, let the kite back out, right? So all of that is playing into the way that you're trying to sail past your rating all of the time.
Even the boats that one sponsor there.
Yeah, right. And I mean, we have, you know, part of what we input our polars, you know, one of the displays on the bulk, it's typically on the bulkhead, gives me my percentage of polars and it gives me what my polar target is, and it gives me the percentage of my polars that I'm sailing at. And so when we're doing routing, you know, depending on the crew that we're sailing with, we might route at 90% of our polars. So when I'm delivering the boat back from Hawaii and I have the delivery sails on, if I'm just being lazy, I might just, all right, screw it, just route the whole thing at 60% of the polars. And then I can adjust them on the fly as I go, like, oh, you know, we're doing a little bit on that. Let's do this at 65% of the polars. So you're always trying to exceed those polars. And you do. And, you know, when you're offshore and you hook into that wave train and you're surfing like, you know, for, you know, 3 or 4 minutes on a plane doing, a, you know, 16 knots, then you're sailing past those numbers. Or when you fall off a wave at 32 or something, and it's like, Jesus, it's got to be a bottom to this wave.
Hey, Nigel, there's a couple thank yous on the chat, but just wanted to say on behalf of.
Yep, sorry, I'm going to keep
Thank you.
babbling.
No, continue the conversation, but I'm gonna go ahead and end the Zoom meeting, so thanks to all the remote participants.
Now we can drink our.
Yeah, I know. I had my one beer.
Before we end the Zoom, can I just ask, how did this new AV system work for everyone on Zoom? How was that? Can you hear everything? Was there anything annoying? Is there anything that didn't work?
I see a couple.
Yeah, I
thumbs
got
up.
some thumbs up. Awesome. Great. Thank you. I'm Leela, by the way. I'm Dougie B's kid. I joined the club. I'm part of this team now.
Room, I can.
Yeah, so
It was better? Okay, and someone just said it was the clearest one they've seen so far.
the
Let's
presenter
go,
was,
Jess, we did it.
the presenter was great, but the questions from the floor
All right,
were
good night,
muted.
all.
Awesome. Good night, everybody.